Dr. Sharif Abdullah offers a unique, hopeful, and visionary perspective on the persistent challenges of our time. His perspective is shaped by his urban upbringing of poverty and violence, his Ivy League education, and his work with impacted communities in America and in 45 countries around the world. His spiritual outlook is rooted in the consciousness of dozens of religions, faith traditions, and spiritual practices. Sharif offers this unique viewpoint, helping us chart a course that explains where we've been, where we are now, and how we get to a positive future that works for all living beings.
Hello, Sharif here, and today we're going to talk about our mental health crisis. Except we're not going to talk about our mental health crisis. I don't think we have a mental health crisis. I think when we talk about mental health, we're talking about something that we are not correctly defining, and therefore, since we're not defining the problem, we're not resolving the problem. We're nowhere near resolving the problem. We can't even begin to fathom how to resolve the problem as long as we're calling it the wrong thing. I don't think we have a mental health problem in our society. I think that we have a spiritual health problem in our society. And the way that spiritual health problem manifests itself, well, it manifests itself in many, many different ways. One of the ways it manifests itself is by people acting out in a way that is non-social, asocial, antisocial. For those of you who watched the video of Seattle is Dying, you saw a lot of people acting out various mental health crises. But I think that all of us were touched by and moved by the guy who was sitting in the trash can screaming. Sitting in the trash can and having no way of connecting with another human being. In that image, everybody in the image was in the middle of a spiritual health crisis. His spiritual health crisis was obvious. He's sitting as a human being in a trash can. The police officers surrounding him are also in their own spiritual health crisis. They're seeing this. And that image of this man in the trash can is working on them. It works on their hearts. They carry this home with them. They either try to bury it with whatever means they use to bury something, generally legal means like alcohol, etc. They may be exhibiting their own negative social behavior. The incidents of domestic violence on police forces, the incidents of them seeking mental health solutions is on the rise. The incidents of them dropping out not only of the police force but dropping out of society, like the police officer that was followed to his retirement retreat in the Seattle is Dying video. All of that is pointing to a crisis, and it's a crisis that in our society we have absolutely no mechanism for handling. We have no way of dealing with it. We tend to talk about mental health in three aspects in the breaker solution. One is mental health counseling, where you sit down with a counselor and you talk out your problems. Well, that's really good if you've got an infinite number of counselors, because we have a close to infinite number of problems. My friends who are in the military and get veterans benefits talk about being able to that they are able to talk to a counselor for 20 minutes per month. You come back from overseas completely screwed up by the experience that you had. You are in a spiritual crisis. And the answer that the VA has is for you to be able to see somebody for 20 minutes every month. Think about how much counseling Mr. Trash Can would need in order for him to be functional. Okay, so one response is give them counseling. The more likely response is give them drugs. Give them drugs that will prevent them from being able to exhibit antisocial or asocial behavior. Give them drugs to make the problem go away from my point of view. They're still sitting in the problem. They're still acting in the problem. They haven't solved anything. They've just postponed the problem. I had a friend who, on the outside, was, because she was using antidepressant drugs, etc., seemed like a happy, well-adjusted person. Inside, she was suicidal. Now, most of the people who knew her only knew her through her Facebook persona. And her Facebook persona, she has all these quotes from the Dalai Lama and pictures of cute kittens and everything like that. If you talked with her, if you actually talked with her for more than 5 or 10 minutes, you begin to see what she's sitting on and what all this stuff is that she's dealing with. Now, again, she's a friend. I would see her a few times a year when I went down to the Bay Area, and while I was there, we would talk about how depressed she was. And at one point she said, "I just wish I could cry." And I said, I've got an absorbent sweater I'm wearing. You can come over here. You can cry on my shoulder as long as you want to. And she said, "You don't understand. I'm taking antidepressants, and they reduce my capacity to be able to cry. It actually suppresses my tear ducts so that you can feel like you've got this well of tears inside of you, and it will never come out and bother anybody else. It'll just bother you." Now, in our society, we see that suppressing behavior is called a cure. It's nowhere near a cure. And when my friend did commit suicide, her Facebook page was lit up saying this had to be a homicide. Someone had to have killed her. She would never have committed suicide. And when I read that, I said, "Now, there's a person that never met her."
You are invited to participate in the discussions and activities that will define a positive future for all. We are at the cusp of the expansion of our human consciousness, beyond the limitations of our past. Together, we can envision a world that embraces our human potential. Together, we can create a world that can truly work for all living beings.